So we are now live there. So Sean, I gave you an introduction. We've been friends for quite a few years.
Yep.
I met you obviously in a marketing group, and your background has been in copywriting. You started out in I think the financial newsletter industry, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I've been in sales before that.
Yep.
And when I found out that you could go from, in-home sales, traveling the road, being in hotels at night, to like writing the same messages to thousands of people at once, and it's on repeat, I was like, sign me up for that. And got into the copywriting field first found out about in 2005. So it's been 15 years now since I've been doing copy, and for all kinds of different companies. Started financial, moved into some B2B, a lot of B2C stuff. So yeah, it's been a good ride. And now I do some consulting for different agencies. Other people contact me. Just had somebody contact me last night, wants me to take part in a new food brand that they just bought. So that's cool. It's kind of cool. It's like once people know you have this little magic skill, that they want to keep talking to you. So it's fun.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I think a copy is like salesmanship on paper, because it's almost people, the way you talk or converse with someone, whether it's a prospect or a customer, it's vaguely, I mean, it's really similar to copywriting in a sense. Most people don't realize, because they don't know how to write copy. And they think of it as having a bunch of bullet points and hitting all the, the sales takeaways, what I need to offer, give them everything I can offer, and sum it up and give them an incentive with a discount or whatever. And that's it. That's the art of sales on paper, but it's really not. It's really about getting people to read your email first and foremost. And that's getting more difficult today when we're getting hit with, people get spammed by email. They get, so many of these promotions. Obviously social media, we're just bombarded with it. So we're just kind of saturated with marketing today. So you have to structure your emails and any of your promotional copy a little bit different, because people are just so savvy today. They know exactly what they're getting.
Yeah. I mean, email is a very intimate, or should be a very intimate communication tool. It's kind of like text is now. That's how email used to be. I remember back in the days when You've Got Mail came out as a movie, and like you were actually excited to get an email, right? And they came in like every once in a while. Now it's like, oh my God, I don't want to have to clean out my email inbox. So how do you convert and get attention in that environment? Well, you have to remember that it's still an intimate setting. And the more you can treat it like you and I were sending an email to each other, but with some persuasion techniques and things like that, you can, and we'll show an example here a little bit later in the show, but people are too serious, I think, in emails. And I don't mean that in too stuff shirted, too corporate-y. You can actually be a lot more casual in email than you think you can.
Absolutely. Yeah. And show personality too. Cause
absolutely.
I think that's more attractive to the reader when you can show some level of personality to that. And again, not sound like you're writing from a corporate letterhead.
Yeah. And some people are scared to do that, especially as a company.
Right.
But I've got, different case studies where I've done that, and it's been very successful, where we take somebody in the company and put a voice on them, give them a voice that they're the ones that write the copy, and people get to know them. They get to know their kids and their pets. And like, you think that wouldn't be good for business, but if you think about what you do, Jonathan, you go actually meet people. You're always doing that kind of stuff.
That's
right? You take them to the golf course, you take them to lunch, you learn about them, you learn about their family, what they like, what they don't like, football. Like, don't be afraid to talk about those things in email.
Sure. Yeah. At the end of the day, people do business with those they know, like, and trust. So,
absolutely.
So you sent me over this, the title of it's 7 Steps for Writing Emails That Get Read and Convert. So it was really timely, because I invited you on yesterday.
Yeah.
With the purpose in talking about how to get emails converted more. And it so happens you were working on this with your team this past week and
Exactly.
putting this together. So, so let's
Yeah.
go through it.
So for those watching on video, you can see I have a big writing tip for you. So
That's perfect. Sean actually uses that pencil.
yes,
Yeah.
try not to hit my ceiling fan when I write this, but yeah, I try to write with my giant pencil. No. All right.
So yeah, so let's go through this. I mean, you put together a nice list. Starting with step one, 7 steps. And again, we'll probably get into that. That's another key in using those numbers and headlines and things like that. But let's start from the top. I'm going to let you take over.
Yeah. So this is, just like I said, 7 steps. And the first one is as soon as I say it's going to sound really obvious, and most people completely overlook this step, or they don't realize that there's a lot of options, right? So the first step is to determine the purpose of the email.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people are just sending emails because they think they're either supposed to, or, whatever. There's all kinds of reasons. So some of the reasons are, number one, you could sell a product. That seems like the most obvious. You can just sell a product. You see a lot of that from, e-com companies. You just get basically what would have been a in the mail flyer or something like that in your inbox. And it's got no personality really to it, or very little. And it just looks like the flyer you get in your mailbox every Wednesday from the grocery store. Like that's what it looks like. And there's just not much to it. And it's usually reliant on a sale or a discount or something like that. So you could sell a product, and there's a couple different ways. You don't have to do it the way I was just describing. Another thing you can do is get them to click to visit an organic page. Maybe you just wrote a blog post or a content piece, or you did a podcast, or you were a guest on a podcast.
Sure.
Get them know going in that that's what I want. I want them to click to go to a piece of organic content that will serve them. Another one is you could subscribe to a hot list. A hot list is like if you're getting ready to roll out a product and you kind of want to find out interest and get a hot list of buyers, or a early bird list or anything like that. You could get people to sign up for that.
Right.
Affiliate offers or joint venture offers is another thing. Like, are you going to promote someone else's product?
Sure.
Make a referral out, those kind of things. Another thing is you could do like giveaway content. Maybe you've got a white paper, a checklist, a PDF or something like that you've created, an infographic. People love infographics.
Yes.
Slide share presentation. Maybe you were at an event and you did a slide share, or you just created a slide share for LinkedIn. You could also share that with your email. Another thing is like promote a contest or an event or a membership drive or whatever it might be. But the main thing is you always want to have a call to action in the email, and it can be a lot of different things, but know going in where you're going to end up. It's like Stephen Covey said in 7 Habits, right? Begin with the end in mind. Right. So you can build the email and build the story that you're going to tell right to the end.
Yeah, because almost like the content in and of itself, whether you're giving away an infographic or a free report or white paper, whatever you want to call it, I feel like that's almost a part of the sales process. It's not a standalone thing that, you want to give value, but it's not like some standalone thing over here. I think it's all designed to bring people, to channel them down the road. Right.
Yep.
And even the content that, it's informing, but at the same time, it's showing the value that your company or your products, like in our industry with, countertops and, kitchen countertops, you need to be educating, because a lot of people come into this and they're not educated. They need some understanding. You kind of have to hold their hand, guide them down in a direction. And you can do that in a lot of ways. But ultimately, you want to guide them by showing them as you're the preferred choice. Not always, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you got to be upfront and say, we're probably not what you're looking for. You should go somewhere else. But in a lot of cases, you are, and you want to get those in.
Yeah, I think another mistake I see a lot is people are trying to go from email to, 3 steps down the road.
Right.
Like, what is the very next step you want them to take? Like, don't skip steps in the sales process. Like, if you need to educate them first, then educate them and be okay with it. That's all you're trying to do. Is the email is just trying to get them to take the next step in the process, whatever that is. Right. You don't want to oversell an email. That's not what email is for. Email is not necessarily a sales tool. You're probably going to link them to a page that has a little bit more selling power.
Yeah.
Or the next step in the selling process, whether it's book a call or come visit us or whatever, that's important.
And it's one thing. You're not asking for
Exactly.
Your real purpose is one thing, just be solely focused on that one thing.
Yeah.
Which is that call to action, get them to, grab this offer.
It's not, we've got a 25% discount on this and here's a PDF and visit us at our next, event live or whatever. It's not three things, which you see a lot, right? You see people, they develop these newsletters and it's got like all these squares with different stuff. Because, it looks all brochure and brandy like, but that's not how you would send an email to a friend.
Mm-hmm.
You'd probably cover one topic that you're kind of on the mind, and you might throw something else like, oh, by the way, also be thinking about whatever in the PS.
Right.
So that's the only time I would, maybe add a second thing.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into the hook. This is the fun stuff. It's like creating a story or some way to hook the reader.
Yeah. So this is really fun. This is the creative part. And so you want to find whoever's creative in your company and kind of just let them loose. But yeah, this is the art part of it, right? There's a lot of science in copy, but there's also a lot of art, like anything you're really good at, right?
Sure.
Whether it's crafting, creating a countertop or anything like that. There's science to it. There's best practices, and then there's art.
Right.
This is kind of a little bit of both. So finding the hook is step 2. Yep. So where do you find the hook? You could use a story, you could use an illustration, you could talk about methods, lessons, all these different things, but where do you start? And that's, this is literally the blank page, right? That blinking cursor staring back at you. So you just start thinking like, so what happened in the last week in the company, in the industry that I could talk about, and just start talking about it. What's a past story from maybe a journal or a white paper or something else, or, what's a comment that maybe had Facebook ads running and somebody wrote a comment on it that you found was either funny or really harsh or whatever. And you could talk about that. Replies to past emails. Like, a lot of times when you send out an email, you'll get a reply. Sometimes they're positive, sometimes they're negative. And don't be afraid to the negative ones actually are sometimes the best ones to write another email about. Because you can say, well, this person sent me this, not saying names or anything, but we got this comment, and it's just a good example of who's not a good fit for our products.
Right.
And you could just go ahead and tell that story. You could talk about normal advice in the industry that's just wrong in your opinion, and kind of take the, the counter approach. You could talk about a mentor's advice, and it doesn't have to be business. Like this could be a personal story. And you'll see why by the time we wrap, like these can be personal events too. You could talk about how you went, like what happened last week could be, I went to a football game and, there was only 25% attendance because of COVID, and I noticed whatever, and you can create a lesson out of that. You could create an observation out of that. And then you're going to have a segue later that will tie into your offer.
Sure.
What's the worst thing someone could do around this subject or this product? Like what's the worst thing you could do if you were installing a shower pan, or what's the worst thing you could do? Like if forgetting this step would be the worst thing you could do. Right. Why they should not buy from you. Yeah. Maybe there's a reason they shouldn't buy.
That goes against all conventional wisdom, but it's very powerful. Like it's because it breaks that train of thought, wait a minute, what?
Yeah. And it's a great way to, and you could take kind of a tongue-in-cheek approach to it, or you can take a very serious approach. Like, if you're, if this is your first time ever, doing whatever, you may not want to use our products because they're more for skilled craftsman type people, or, the other way around. It could be a lot of different things.
Right.
You could actually break out steps from the PDF or report that we talked about before, right? So let's say there's a white paper somebody just downloaded. You're doing a follow-up email series that because most people, even though they download a report, they don't always get to it right away, and then it disappears into your digital file cabinet on your computer and you forget it. So do a follow-up report that breaks down a follow-up email series that breaks down the report that they asked for, just reinforces what you said, and it just allows them to kind of read it in chunks as they go.
Sure.
You can bust myths. You can do recommendations of the opposite of what's popular. Like all these different things are ways that you can go. I actually use, I think I've showed it to you before, Jonathan. I actually have a matrix that I've designed that lets me tap into like current events and social media trends and all that kind of stuff, and incorporates a lot of these ideas as well.
Yeah. HGTV is a big one. Like people who are huge fans of HGTV and they turn that show on, and it's really, I mean, those shows can really hook you. I mean, watching those things, but you could bust or go kind of against the grain and really kind of challenge conventional or some of the stuff that they put onto those shows. Cause I know a lot of it's all meant for entertainment, but using stuff like that in the headline or using content like that, in your emails certainly can draw some attention.
Yeah. You could do like, 3 reasons you're not going to remodel your kitchen in 30 minutes.
Right.
And kind of play off the 30-minute length of a show. And,
that's right.
Talk about some of the problems and
exactly.
Or even like a checklist, like here's a checklist. If you're going to remodel your kitchen, here's the order you need to do things in. Do you order the counters first or the cabinets first? Like that would seem obvious to a counter or a cabinet person, but to someone who's never done that,
exactly,
they don't know the timelines and the project management and all that of that.
Yeah.
So you could give away a checklist, project management checklist. That's for a great idea. Remodeling.
Yeah. I like that.
All right. So step 3. So once you kind of got your angle that you're going to go with and why you're writing your email, then you want to write down just, 3 to 5 points. Think of this kind of like the old high school essay, not as rigid and things like that, but that's a good, you got your hook, which is kind of like your thesis statement. Then you've got your like 3 to 5 points that you want to cover. Doesn't have to be that, but about, and then kind of your conclusion or segue that's going to segue into your offer.
Sure.
And then also, like, can you do a quick search to find out any credibility or quotes or proofs or statistics that might back up what you're saying, or a story or anything else? Like behind me on my bookshelf, like one whole row of this bookshelf behind me is like story illustrations, sermon illustrations, quotes, quotable quotes, like all those kind of things, so that if I ever need them, I can just go back there, pull a book and get it. If I don't have my own story, I can borrow a story that's, kind of a proven lesson or moral of the story type, story. And those make really good intros to emails and things like that. And they've stood the test of time if they made it to a book.
Social, when you're looking social proof, that can be, examples of customers who've done business with you, or testimonials, or all sorts of things. I mean, that you can use.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be your people. Like you can take what we call third party credibility. And if it's talking about a process, let's say if your process is pretty universal, but maybe your customers don't know about it, but somebody's written about that process.
Right.
You could borrow that credibility from the journal that wrote about it or whatever, and kind of infer that, you use this process also, but you kind of get the third party credibility from, the trade journal that recommends it or something like that.
Right.
Or a certain, adhesive that you use, or certain sealer, or certain composite, whatever. Yeah. So you don't be afraid to use third party credibility if they're talking, even if they're not talking about your company specifically, but they may be talking about the processes you use or the philosophy you use or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got, we have it's a quarterly, it's a quarterly trade journal that goes out, in our industry. And a lot of times, some of our members are featured in that, or just every issue, actually. So, that's an opportunity to say, kind of borrow from that, like you're saying, that third party, to say, hey, we were featured in this past month's Cast Polymer Connection, and it was a great article written up about us, and you might want to check it out. So that just lends to that credibility there.
Absolutely. So let's move on to step number 4. This is a stopper for a lot of people, but it's writing a strong subject line, right? So you can get hung up here for sure.
Yep.
I love using like current events, and I like thinking about, I really try to put myself as if I'm writing to a friend. Like if I was going to write you something, like literally what would that look like? My subject line is probably going to be short and quippy. Punctuation is not going to be like, I'm not going to use title caps where, every letter in the word, each word is capitalized where it looks like a headline. I'm going to probably write it where it's just, I maybe do all lowercase. Like I may not even properly punctuate it. Like all those things make it look a little bit more personal. And I know that freaks some companies out. You try to avoid typos, but some of the things you can do is like number of tips. You could do hot news, like whatever's in the industry, whatever's in the public eye. You talk about a train wreck, like a job that went terribly wrong, or a customer wrote in and they just screwed everything up.
Yeah.
You could talk about that. Think about a train wreck type scenario, because people love watching a train wreck, right?
Sure.
You could ask a curiosity question. You could talk about some controversy. You could, really emphasize a big benefit. Another good place to get ideas is magazine cover blurbs.
Oh yeah.
I call this my aisle 9 secret, because the grocery store where I'm at, their magazine is on aisle 9.
Yeah.
Their magazine rack. And every time I go in there, I'll just take a, stroll by the magazine rack, and I'll look at all the blurbs that's on the covers.
Yeah.
For all the different industries, and just see if there's anything. And I'll just take my phone and I'll just snap a couple pictures of covers. And then if I'm ever stuck, I kind of scroll through those and use the, if it says 7 ways to lose 7 pounds in 7 days, right? I'm like, okay, there's kind of that's a formula.
Yeah.
7 ways to blank, 7 and 7, like that's a little
Absolutely.
formula I can follow. And I start just rearranging the words, filling in the words for the industry. And that's a really good way to do it.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's my
I
favorite
like
though
the
is
example. Oh, go ahead.
my favorite is really like trying to tap into current events.
Yeah.
In some way. And the email I'm going to share here in a minute will show you how I did that.
Okay. Yeah, I like some of the examples. The secret, they want you to know, or you could actually use don't want you to know, because actually you could go either way with that. But anytime you use certain words, secret, it builds curiosity. That's the whole point, is to build curiosity in your title.
Well, in the example in the document here, so actually this is like a before and after.
Yeah.
So like the secret they don't want you to know, or the secret they want you to know, like the way I wrote it, all the first letters are capitalized. So it looks very much like a headline.
Right.
In the second example, I put, hey, comma, did you hear this secret? Or, hey, comma, did you hear about this? Something like that. And even like the hey is the first letter is not capitalized. So it's like how I would write it to you. Like if I was, texting you or writing you an email, I sent you an email this week about a documentary I thought you should watch, How would I write that headline? I'd be like, hey, have you seen this yet?
Yeah.
Right. And you'd be like, oh, I got to open that to see what Sean wants me to see.
Yep.
So think of it like that, because email is not a one-to-many communication tool. It's a one-to-one. Even though we can do batch email, and even though we have a list, it still has to feel one-to-one.
Right.
That's what makes it effective.
Right.
So think about that with your subject line too. It needs to feel like you're talking to one person.
Yeah. Don't start an email with to all of our customers,
Yeah, exactly.
Comma, and then start your email. That's never a good place to start, because you just feel like you're okay. I'm
a cog in the wheel.
Yeah, exactly. So
step 5 is pretty long, but it's pretty straightforward. So this is where you actually sit down and write the email. You kind of got all your materials together. You're going to sit down and write the email. Right. Number 1, forget everything you learned in high school and college English classes, and simply write like you talk.
Yeah.
And write to you like you talk to your longtime friend who also is interested in the subject. Because if people are on your email list, they're probably interested in what you do.
Sure.
So treat it like somebody who's already interested. Don't try to oversell in the email. Let the sales pages or the sales materials do that. You just want to keep the conversation going. You want it to be kind of light and, informative and all these things. Tell stories. People love stories. I can't, we've talked about this before, Jonathan, like people love stories, and they just They work really well. Use words that create mind pictures. So, it kind of goes back to the old sales idea, show, don't tell. Like in your writing, you want to do the same thing. You want to show people more than you want to tell them. It needs to be, they need to be like experience what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Never apologize for selling or asking for action. Like, don't get to, it's Zig Ziglar used to say, timid salespeople have skinny kids, right? Like you can't get all tight because it'll come across in writing. Like you can tell when people get nervous in writing, just like you can when they talk. It's crazy. This is going to sound crazy to a lot of people, but 300 to 500 words is like, I think the sweet spot. It's enough to get people engaged and tell a story and transition. I've gone longer. I've done 1,200 word emails, and they get good response.
Yeah.
Think of it like this. You would not give a salesperson, if you sent a salesperson to someone's house, you would not give them a word limit.
No.
You would ask them to communicate until they got the sale.
Right.
Right. Now, obviously
they're needed.
your words are needed, but obviously now we're not trying to get the email to do everything. So this is kind of like your intro and your rapport building and that kind of stuff. And then to the next step.
Yeah.
If possible, write uninterrupted, like write the whole email. Don't write the first bit and go to lunch and come back and then try to finish the email.
Sure.
The reader will feel that. I can't explain it, but I can tell you. Now, you can write the whole thing, go to lunch and come back and edit. That's fine. But try to write at least the draft uninterrupted.
Okay.
Set off all distractions, turn off the phone, pause Slack, and just really focus for, 20 minutes to write that email and write a good email.
Yep.
Some first sentences, because a lot of people have trouble with the first sentence. First of all, remember where you're going, and what your subject line was, so you can kind of tie all that together. But some of the opening sentences might be, have you ever wondered why? And then you state a problem. Or recently I was out wherever, and you kind of go into a story. Hey, what if you could, and you kind of talk about a benefit.
Right.
Ever since and then you tell another story.
Yeah.
I'm looking for this, and you could qualify a customer depending on what the situation there is. The experts say, and then you could agree or disagree with whatever the experts say. As you know, and then you could confirm something they already know. So you get them in agreement with you right away. And then you can either introduce something different or something, similar along that path. I need your help. That's a good request email. If you're going to be asking them to like reply back or to give you information, just say right up front, I need your help.
Yeah.
And don't be shy about it. Don't like apologize for it. Just flat out, hey, I need your help.
Right.
I need your opinion. I need whatever. What if, and then you talk about either a nightmare scenario or a dream scenario, right? So you could paint the really good side and how your product fills that, or you could talk about a nightmare and then how your product could have prevented that nightmare. And then here's a shortcut for whatever benefit you're looking for.
Right.
So those are some good first line type things. And then step number 6 is the segue. So think about this, like you see them do this on, Sports Center. You see them do this on the evening news with local news, whatever. Whenever they pass like the conversation from one person next, or they're changing topics from, football to baseball or from whatever to the top 10 list, there's always that segue.
Sure.
And sometimes it's like really cheesy and corny. Sometimes it's really nice and smooth. You want to be thinking about that as you're writing. How am I going to segue to whatever the offer is?
Right.
What's the turn of phrase I'm going to use? And does this story or the lesson I'm telling flow naturally to the offer? And sometimes it's easy as, which reminds me, and then you tell then you introduce the product or the solution, right?
Because that sounds like just the way you would be talking. Oh,
yeah.
That reminds me, Yeah.
And you kind of want that, because if they know where you're going, this sounds counterintuitive, right? If people know where you're going with the email, they more quickly actually tune it out.
Sure.
Because their brain's like, oh, I know where this is going. They're going to sell me something. So I'll just go ahead and close it now. I don't need that. But if they're not sure and you're telling a story, they're kind of like engaged in the story and they're like, I'm not
Right.
sure where this is going, but this is kind of a cool story.
Sure.
Where's he going to end up? And by the time they get to the segue, they're like, oh, I see. This is like that.
Yeah.
I should probably look at that.
Right.
But by then they're hooked.
Sure.
So you want to think about that segue, but oftentimes it's just as easy as this kind of reminds me of, or, one way to avoid this problem is, like, especially if you were doing like a problem or a nightmare story, you could, one way to avoid this, or Sally could have avoided this if she had known about widget WCZ,
right.
or whatever. So, I keep thinking about building a shower for some reason with the shower pans, because that could be a nightmare if you don't do it right.
Absolutely.
And then it's a nightmare, 2 or 3 years down the road because it's been a slow leak, and next thing you know, your shower falls through the floor. Like, that's a great nightmare story to sell a shower pan.
It's upstairs. That's a huge nightmare. Yeah.
Especially if it's like right above your office and crashes down on your MacBook, and you could really but those are word pictures, right? Like, the listeners, as we're even joking about it, like, you can visualize that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can visualize that, it makes it real for people.
Yeah.
And then finally, the last step, and then we'll show an actual email how we did this.
Okay.
Is to edit the email. And you're just going to make a few passes. You're going to look at it. You're going to say, is it entertaining?
Right.
Is it useful but incomplete? Like, it needs to be incomplete. Mm-hmm. It needs to be an open loop. You talked about HGTV. I mean, they're masters at this, right? Right before every commercial break, they throw just the perfect edit in. You're like, I don't know if that person, whether it's House Hunters, whatever, like, oh, she's pissed. Like,
oh yeah,
he wants contemporary. She wants classic. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my God, how do these people stay married? Yeah. And they leave in every commercial break. They leave you on a cliffhanger. Your email needs to kind of do the same thing. And so that the click is like the next step to get the satisfaction of the end of the story, or at least the next step in the story. Yeah. So think about it like that. Like, if you really want to know more, like, wouldn't necessarily even tell what the product is if it was a solution story. Mm-hmm. You'd say, if you want to find out how to keep this from happening to you, click here. And then it takes them to the product page. Sure. As opposed to giving them the answer in the email, right? Because you want to get that click through, because every time you get click through rates up, your email service provider, and they like your emails more, they trust them more because people are clicking through. Deliverability goes up because they've clicked through. So you do need people to click through. Do you have a clear call to action of what to do now, next? Your paragraph short. Don't do long block. Like, you got to have white space in your emails. Yeah. People will not read if they open up and see a huge block of text. Use that return key on your keyboard. Yeah. It's vital in copywriting. Yeah. You can use incomplete sentences. You can do all kinds of stuff, and you'll see it in the example. And does your story, lesson, info prove your empathy? Show that do they know, understand them, understand their problems, understand their challenges. Right. And do you present an air of authority? You're not wishy-washy. Like, you're just like, your stuff. That should come across. It should be kind of what we call the doctor frame, right? The doctor doesn't be like, well, I'm not sure if I should prescribe this or not. No, they like, you need to take this to the pharmacy. They're going to fill this for you. You need to take 2 a day. Call me in 3 days. Mm-hmm. They're very clear on what needs to happen next. Absolutely. And you need to be the same way. Yeah. All right. Whew. That's a lot. So. Oh, I'm telling you. So we're going to bring up an example. Is that what we're going to do here? Yeah. I'll share it on the screen, and then we can, all right. Get the right screen here. There we go. Awesome. Let me blow this up a little bit. So ironically, one of my clients actually is in the granite countertop business. Like, they make granite and quartz countertops. They're a big regional company that does granite and quartz countertops. So I'm kind of familiar with a lot of the stuff. And I've also, one of the companies I worked for a long time was a distributor in this space as well. Right. So I've worked with both the B2B side and the B2C side. So this is a B2C. Although, obviously they have some B2B people on their list, like contractors and things like that. But is that showing up? Is that big enough? I'm going to go one. Yeah, go one more. There we go. All right. So the idea here was we're talking to a list. We need to reactivate the list a little bit and get them excited. They have not emailed this list much at all when I started doing this. They're not very good writers by their own admission. So they hired me to write it.
Sure.
And my first thought was, okay, so kind of what's the conversation already going on in people's minds right now? If I want to sell them a countertop, or, well, they're spending a lot of time in their kitchen. They're spending a lot of time at home, period, right? With the whole COVID and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So I was like, my first thought was, when I was brainstorming ideas, was locked up staring at those old counters, right? So that was my original idea here. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the hook. Yep. But then I was like, well, that's good, but that's a little too obvious for a subject line.
Right.
So what I did is I kind of took out some of the, the counters. So I went with a little bit more mystery.
Sure.
And I said, tired of staring at each other yet. Yep. Now I knew as soon as I wrote that I was actually talking about the counters, not necessarily each other. Right. But I wanted kind of the play on words, and you'll see that I kind of use that, right?
Yeah.
So then I just go into it. And notice the spacing. If you're on video, notice the spacing of the thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of short sentences, and it's just very conversational. Mm-hmm. And this went out as basically it's HTML, but it went out looking like a text email, right?
Sure.
There was no pictures, there was no images, there was nothing. Had the footers and all that stuff that you got to have for, unsubscribe links and all that. But for the most part, it looked like a personal email.
Yeah.
So, hey, name, how are you doing? It's been a weird few months, hasn't it? So right there, if you think about, so I'm stating something they know to be true right off the bat.
Right.
Like
timely.
Yeah. And now school is starting back, because this went out, I think, like mid-August. So in their part of the country, schools were kind of starting back, but they weren't really, right? So I played off that. It's like, and now school is starting back, ... sort of, maybe, ? So I'm like really tapping into, I understand what they're going through right now. Mm-hmm. Anyway, since this whole lockdown, stay at home deal, we've all been spending a lot more time staring at each other. Nobody's going to deny that.
Nope.
And you may have begun to notice some things you hadn't noticed before. Things like, now this is where I kind of get playful and show a little personality and really show again that I understand what they're going through. Sure. So you may have begun to notice some things you hadn't noticed before. Things like how many pairs of sweatpants, gym shorts, leggings, and t-shirts you and your family own, or how often some wear the same ones.
Right.
Now, see, a lot of people would have just went ahead and gone right into this counter example right there. But I was like, no, I need to soften this a little bit. I want to keep them guessing about where I'm going.
Yeah.
And I want to have a little fun. I want to have a little humor. I want to really relate to the people. So then I say, or how much time you spend in your kitchen now that restaurants are either closed or more of a hassle than it's worth. So that's kind of my segue. Now I've segued to the kitchen.
That's a nice tie-in. I like that.
Right? And then I say, and speaking of kitchens, so that's the actual segue. Mm-hmm. Have you been staring at your counters, wondering if it's finally time to upgrade them to the latest materials like quartz and granite, both in the latest colors? Yeah. If so, I'm glad you opened this email today. You see, we just received a huge new selection of stone. Gorgeous stuff. And I'd love for you to have first dibs on it for your kitchen or bath or bar or hearth. So there I know some people on this list, this company doesn't have like super great segmentation in their list.
Sure.
So I know there's some people that have already bought from them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I threw in the bath, the bar, the hearth, outdoor kitchen. There's a lot of other things, that you can have granite countertops for. And then I say, after all, you're probably spending quite a bit more time in your kitchen than ever before, so might as well be a place you love hanging out, right? However, if it's not the place in your home that you love to gather and entertain, then let us help. Because what does everybody on HGTV say about the kitchen?
Yeah.
They want to entertain, right?
That's right. That's the whole purpose.
That's the whole purpose of a kitchen. It's not to eat. It's not to cook. It's to entertain.
Yep.
So to tap into that, like that phrase has become just so common in our culture. Mm-hmm. That like people believe that's true, even if they've never had people over to their house. Like
sure.
But they all envision, if I just had the right kitchen, I could entertain. Like that's a dream for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I'm tapping into that. And then I do the call to action. You can stop by any of our locations found here and a hyperlink to the site. You can also use our website to get a free estimate with just a few pictures uploaded from your phone. They have a special feature where you can literally just take pictures and they kind of give you a ballpark estimate based off your pictures. Either way, once you find what makes your heart skip a beat, you won't find a better price anywhere. We guarantee it. So what do you say? Ready to stop staring at those counters that are just okay and ready to fall in love with your kitchen again? Stop by and see for yourself the difference a new granite or quartz counter can make.
Yeah.
So you can see that's very like just casual. It's very personable, person to person. Doesn't sound like a corporate letter, but it's absolutely, selling something.
Sure.
Got a lot of humor in it. Relatable, right, with what they're going through and all that kind of stuff.
And it got you reading that. I mean, the whole purpose again is to get people to read the next paragraph of the next line.
Yep.
And the way you structured it, kind of shifting from one thing back to another, like we were talking earlier, it keeps people on their toes and it gets them to read the next line. And that's really the main purpose is like, you don't want the worst thing you can do is be boring. You start out really good, but then you just start to fade away. And like you said, you get eyeballs that start turning away and
that's right.
That's it.
Yep.
So
there you go. That's how you write an email in 7 steps.
Very good. Well, hopefully we can get maybe a revised copy with your contact information on that we can I can share with our listeners when we post this or publish this page. And I'll
get you a little PDF version of this this afternoon.
Okay, that works great. And so where can people? I want to mention you. If people have questions regarding writing good copy, how could they reach out to you if they want to send you a quick question or introduce themselves? What's the best way?
Yeah, so they can go to SeanMcCool.com, and it's SeanMcCool. And yes, that is my real last name.
That Sean, is not a stage name. That is his real name.
Yeah, so Sean, like Sean Connery, McCool, McCool.com. That's kind of my one of my corporate consulting websites. So yeah, you can go there, and you can also find me. I'm on Facebook, and you can send me a messenger there. I'm also on LinkedIn. It's a good way to throw me a message in the inbox there. So yeah, just search Sean McCool, and I'm the copywriter. I also do a lot of coaching, so you may see some coaching references as well.
Sure.
Because to me, it's all words. It's all influencing behavior. And so yeah, that's where you find me, SeanMcCool.com.
Well, this has been great, man. I appreciate you coming on, Sean. It's been fun to talk about this. We have another show that we do together where we talk a lot about this kind of stuff. And it doesn't matter what platform. It's always good to kind of go back through and look at some of this stuff and remind yourself, even though you're in it. Sometimes you need a reminder, like, wait a minute, I'm missing out something here. Oh, here's what I just missed out on. And
it's one of the reasons I teach this stuff is because it reminds me when I teach it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening. As always, you can find us over at castpolymerradio.com or castpolymer.com. And Sean, it's been a pleasure. Thanks again for coming on, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Thanks.
All right, man. That was great.
Cool.